Welcome back, Sherlockians. Did you miss us? Today on the Sherlock After Show, we talk about the Season 4 premiere, The Six Thatchers. Stay tuned.
You're tuning into the destination for TV superfan discussion, AFTERBUZZ TV. And now, let the buzz begin.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
We're here. Welcome back to AFTERBUZZ TV. Yes, we are here doing the Sherlock After Show.
So excited. I love this music.
It's been a long time.
It's been like 3 years.
Oh, yeah, give or take. Yeah, no, it has been 3 years. Goodness me. We are here doing the Sherlock After Show, Season 4, Episode 1, The Six Thatchers. I'm your host, Marisa Serafini. Joining me, we have some new faces to our panel.
I know. Hello, I'm Drexel Heard. You can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Drexel Heard.
Hey everybody, I'm Timothy Michael. You can follow me on all social media platforms at I am Timothy Mike. I'm super excited to be here with you, Marissa.
Yes, I'm excited. This is our first show together.
It is. I'm excited to do the show with you guys.
I'm excited to do this show.
I was like, okay, because I was part of the original panel when we just started Sherlock for
Wow.
Season 3. And I was like, we still got to talk about Sherlock. Season 4 is back, finally. And I was like, we're going to make this happen. We got a panel, and you two are
jumped
now
right on it.
joining us.
I'm really excited.
I forgot
great.
that it was like 2014 when we last saw the season.
I know.
I told somebody earlier, it was like Game of Thrones does like a year before the next
Not even,
season.
I feel like Sherlock is on its own level with the whole cliffhanger thing because they make you wait years. It's ridiculous.
And then we come
Very
back.
true. And then we come
with
back.
bells and whistles
Like
on.
nothing
like
happened.
nothing happened. Like we didn't miss it for 3 years. Yeah.
Exactly, and I think that gets us right into this episode, though. But like, real quick thoughts before we actually get into it. What were your thoughts about this episode? You know, coming back after 3 years.
I was, I guess I can't say impressed because we all knew that it was going to be amazing. I was shocked at the final moments of the episode. I guess we'll talk about that later. But
Yes.
I was very upset.
Okay.
I was really upset.
For this episode.
I'm a huge, I mean, not huge, but I mean, like, I'm a big enough Sherlock fan to be like, oh my goodness, you know, this episode was really great right out the gate. This is exactly what we needed. This reintroduced us back, you know, from the last season into Sherlock. We didn't know what was going to happen. And I thought it was a really great, like, you know, what I love about this show is that it picks up right where it leaves off. So we're not like thinking about, oh my goodness, what happened in the time. You know, last we saw Sherlock, he got on a plane. This is like right when he came back. And this
Right.
was like what happened in that time and stuff like that. So they're rehashing that piece out. And so I love that about the show, that even like we said, 3 years later, we can still remember, oh my goodness, this is what happened. And I love that they picked up, because Tim and I do Quantico After Show, and we talked about last night that they rehashed at the beginning for new viewers what happened from the mid-season
Previous.
finale from the previous season, like for the first 10 minutes of the show. And that's what they did in Sherlock this time, is that they kind of rehashed the beginning, or what happened at the end of last season in the beginning of this season, which I thought was cool.
Yeah, and the good thing about it, they didn't spend a lot of time trying to like catch us up to where
Right.
it was. It was more so, Sherlock is now clear. The surveillance, they fixed the surveillance,
They
so
doctored
he's not
The surveillance.
doctored, quote unquote. He's not quite the murderer, but he still killed
I mean,
a man.
come on, let's be honest. He deserved to die. Let's be
Yes, Charles Magnuson was not
Yeah,
a good
right.
man.
Yes.
But Sherlock is off the hook, pretty much. And I'm glad that we can kind of actually just bury that and move on to the next new story.
Well, it's funny because I thought that they would begin this season with trying to clear him, or of these ways of trying to clear him, but they didn't do that. They went right into it and was like, "This is how we cleared you, done,"
Yeah,
which I love.
move on.
Yep.
Right.
Back to going solve cases, which I loved. Mycroft at the beginning of this episode, still the same type of Mycroft, so very himself, which I enjoyed.
But he was protecting his brother,
True.
so
True.
I mean that says a lot about his character development in the show in
Character
itself.
development.
Character development in the show, because we just get this whole cold-hearted feeling toward Mycroft, and I feel like at the end of it, he's always trying to protect his brother.
Yeah. My question is, now that coming back, for us, the viewers in real time, it's been years watching it, but Sherlock seemed completely different, though. He's more in the social media game, he's blogging, he's more interacting with his fans.
Well, he's not blogging. John is blogging.
John is
He's
blogging.
taking credit for it.
But he's
How many times did we hear
tweeting.
that this season, too?
He's tweeting. He's
Right.
like moving up in the 21st century world, which is very surprising to come back to Sherlock, who's like so now engaged with his fans.
I mean, do we think that they're trying to get like a younger audience to kind of tune in? and that's why they're introducing the social media aspect.
I think so, yeah.
I mean, when the show first started, I mean, they were doing the text messages on the screen, which I thought was a brilliant idea. And to see him like tweeting and it being on the screen, I'm like hashtags, like that was super cute. I really liked it.
Yeah, and what I love about this show is the juxtaposition between this kind of old time Sherlock with these cases. Even when we talked about The Abominable Bride, like it felt old. It felt like it was back in the 20s, like in that, or the 1800s or whatever, in that old time. But in reality, this guy is tweeting, and we see this kind of, what does he call it? His mind palace.
Yes.
And so the way that they use those elements in the show really brings the modern aspect to Sherlock. So I love that.
Yes, and like what we love every episode is that he's solving his cases, and that's how they kind of had the time lapse of, we're back in the action and they're still living out their day-to-day lives solving problems. And in cases like the Dusty Death, Duplicate Man, Circus Torso, all these things which were really fun, Canary Trainer, Cardiac Arrest, until Lestrade actually brings them, of course, a new case. That's always fun to watch and have Sherlock follow. What were your thoughts about this David Wellsborough case? It's his 50th birthday and they bring Sherlock in. We find out that his son died.
The writers of the show are kind of amazing because they think of these outrageous scenarios where his son called him from Tibet, and then it turns out a week later they find his body in the car, but he's been dead for a week. So he called his dad from the driveway, and then Sherlock has to figure it out. And I think that it's just brilliant how the writers figure this whole story out and solve it within 10 minutes of the episode.
I'm wondering if Stephen Moffat and his team work backwards, when they're writing stuff, or do they come up with it as it's kind of going on? You're like, oh, I wonder, like he said, is he already dead, or do they get to that point when he's dead?
This is how he died. Let's figure out how how they got to
and
where he
that would
dies.
actually be really cool in terms of how they break down how Sherlock thinks about it. Because as they're coming up with it, they're working backwards. Sherlock, as they write his dialogue, as they write how he kind of figures pieces out, they're kind of figuring pieces out too. So I'm wondering if that's the case. In terms of this case, I thought it was really, a really cool way. Like I said, what I love about this whole show is that each episode's a very different case, and that we're not stuck, it strings itself along, but each episode is very different. And I thought this case was a really great one to kind of get Sherlock back in the game, and to the point where him and John are starting out okay. Dr. Watson. So I thought it was a cool case.
Contrary to what the end is of this episode.
Right.
We'll get there.
Speaking of just bringing in a younger audience with the whole tweeting thing and everything, I feel like this case in itself brought in a younger audience because the kid was in that chair, the seat cover.
Oh yeah,
The vinyl cover.
Yeah, and do you guys remember the YouTube video of the guy that goes to the drive-thru?
Magic of Rahat.
Yes, and he
Yes.
Magic of Rahat. He uses the same kind of thing and scares the drive-thru people like McDonald's and Burger King.
I wonder
and
if
stuff
that's
like
where
that.
they got their inspiration.
That's what I'm
wonder.
thinking. I think that's
Interesting.
where they got it from because like I said, bringing in a younger audience and everything.
Apparently, I'm not hip enough because I did not know that. Good to know.
I have spent many a late night YouTubing Magic of Rahat things, being
really
like,
funny.
oh my goodness, this is so funny, and laughing. So
I'm gonna have to look that up. But
It's
thank
fun.
you. That they see that, but the creators Moffat and Gaddis, that I'm sure they are very in tune with YouTube and everything, the online presence that the show has, and they get their inspiration from anywhere.
Yeah,
Platforms such as YouTube. It'd be cool if that was actually
the inspiration for
the
it.
origin of
If
how they
Rahat
got
was
this
his
story.
kid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That sounds terrible. But the good thing about this case is that, yes, Holmes solves it so quickly, but it brings us to the Thatcher bus.
Right.
Which it just opens oh, something's wrong with this. And I thought that was so smart how that ties into the bigger case that's actually, you think it'd be this small case, but there's actually a bigger case.
Well, that's what's fascinating about the way that Sherlock's mind works is he pays attention to the most obscene details that would be, so ordinary to you and I, but the way that his mind works, he processes it in a completely different way and says, well, why is that there? How did it get there? And then breaks it down from there. Because it was like when he was talking to the parents, the grieving parents, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And he's like, where's that dust from? And they're like, well, it's from a Margaret Thatcher bus. Somebody broke it a while ago. What about our son? Like, it's like, could you focus? And he's like, I am focused. I got it. Like, it's amazing.
But I also think that Sherlock always, I feel like he always has to think of how these cases are connected, because he's so afraid of what Moriarty's going to be doing, because like we said at the end of the last season, we saw Moriarty's face pop up everywhere. So I think going into a lot of these cases, he's like, something else is connected to this case. Everything is strung along, because I feel like he feels like every case that he is drawn to has a connection, and that connection is Moriarty in his head. And
in his head, yes, which
makes him dig deeper.
Yes.
Right, which we come to find out that Moriarty is not even involved in this
episode.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's like how big of a presence Moriarty had on his life, and such that influence of just how he thinks, that he's convinced himself that everything he does, somehow Moriarty is behind it.
Did you think Moriarty was coming back in the beginning of this episode?
I was kind of, yes. Actually, I was,
did you think he was
especially in
dead?
this episode. No, I was like, how can all those, see, as a viewer, I was like, how can all those videos of him popping up everywhere that everyone can see him publicly be like, did you miss me?
Right.
Like, how could he do that posthumously?
Right.
Unless it was pre-recorded and somehow someone else put that on.
I remember being like, he's not dead. He can't be dead
No.
because of all of this.
No, I knew he was dead. I was like, we saw him die. Like, we literally saw him die. I mean, granted, we thought we saw Sherlock die
we saw
also.
Sherlock die.
Granted,
Right.
we thought we saw Sherlock die too, but literally his body was like right there.
But
Like,
and
we
then
saw
that
it.
goes back to, when you watch TV shows and you go, the first rule of television, if you don't see the body, that means they're not dead.
Yes.
And I don't remember seeing Moriarty's...
His body was there on the roof.
But so was Sherlock.
He shot himself.
When he fell off the
on
building,
that
Yeah.
building, yes.
like we also
Yes.
saw that whole thing happen, and then come to
Different
find out
angles,
different
blah,
angles,
blah,
blah, blah, blah. I mean, it could have been different angles with that too.
I
All
don't
that Sherlock
know.
said.
I still think he's dead.
If there's folks in the chat room, I want to know if we
Yes.
can bring it up. That'd be great.
People are in the chat room. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We're definitely excited to be back, and everyone else is excited as well. So these Margaret Thatchers, we find out that this is part of the
I love that.
the Margaret Thatcher bus. Which I thought was very smart, how they string along to just taking us literally kind of all over the world. I thought that was brilliant. But that leads to someone is breaking into houses, breaking these bus. What did you think this was going to lead to? Did you expect this to be like connected to Mary?
No, not at all. I thought
Not
that
at all.
came out of left field, which again, just hat off to the writers for just coming out of left field with these things. But I had no idea what the bus involved. I guess on some kind of level, I thought they had something to do with Moriarty. But I still thought that he was dead, but I thought that it was maybe like something that he planned from before, and somebody else is acting it out now. That's what I thought.
Yeah, I thought it was more of a Mycroft situation, because I think that when you think of you think of Margaret Thatcher, you think of the government. You're not really thinking of somebody like Mary in particular. I mean, Mary and Margaret. Maybe that could have been a connection if we were really thinking about it. Like, yeah, Margaret Thatcher's Mary. Yep, that's good. But
Political figure.
Yeah.
figure.
So I think on some level, I assumed that it was going to be an attack on Parliament. I thought it was going to be an attack on the government.
Like a terrorism.
Like a terrorism.
V for
yeah.
Vendetta episode.
Like a V for Vendetta episode, yeah. And so, I mean, and who knows what could have been in, those bus forms, those head bus. So I thought that was cool.
I thought it was very cool, very smart. I liked how, it takes us kind of all over the world, and we see them traveling all over the place. And we find out that all these buses are getting broken and destroyed, but now it's leading up to murder. So it's actually escalating to homicide. So something serious is happening, and that takes us to John Sandifer's house, but that pool fight was ridiculous.
That pool fight was amazing.
I mean,
It was
ridiculous in an awesome
It
way.
was like Matrix
what
meets
is
like
happening?
it was epic.
But I also miss the old. I don't know if you guys remember in the first season when Moriarty and Sherlock were in the pool. That pool scene and like how great that pool scene was.
Yeah.
And it was just so real. And now we're in 20 no, film last year, but 2016, 2017, and now everything, to what you said, everything is more digital. Everything, it's a little bit more modern than we're used to when in these first couple of seasons. I just want to. Somebody's in the chat room said, "Will you post new Sherlock episodes every Tuesday?" I know
we are marathoning.
We're marathoning tonight.
All 3 episodes.
So you get them all today, this Tuesday,
Yes.
right now.
Because we're very excited. We have to talk
Surprise!
about this. So everything will be available. Keep tuning in because we're going to be here all night.
Do you think somebody, Christian Blatt's in the chat room right now? He hosts Trump Report right after the show.
Hello, Christian.
And so he said, I think Moffat just had some Thatcher rage he wanted to act out on. A lot of Britons did not like Margaret Thatcher. So the idea of seeing all of these busts being destroyed, maybe
That's
like you said, it was a little bit of passive.
That's their
British passive
aggression.
aggressive.
Leave it to Christian to bring in the pool fight. Thank you, Christian.
Thank you, Christian. And I never really thought of that because we aren't
we
really
don't
influenced by
think
that.
that
We're not
like that,
in that world
Right.
Yeah.
where that would be a mere thought. Interesting. Yeah, that's cool. But like real quickly, I liked how you mentioned that the pool scene in season 1 with Moriarty. Those were 2 completely different games, quote unquote. That was with Moriarty. That was more of a mental game. But this one's more of a physical game.
Yeah.
Right.
The game is on.
Right.
Hence, that's what Sherlock says. But we learned that this guy who's breaking all these busts is actually AJ, part of Agra. That was the assassination team that Mary was a part of 6 years ago.
Yeah.
One of the things that and watching that scene, just to bring up the Matrix point of it, what I thought was, the entire time I kept thinking to myself, is this like, he just, Benedict Cumberbatch just finished Doctor Strange. Is this like, did they just be like, actually, you can do these great fight scenes because we've seen it in Doctor Strange, and now this is what we're going to incorporate into that. We know you're capable of doing that because, we didn't see that type of fight scene at all in the past. We've never really seen those type of fight scenes.
No,
it's always been kind of chessmate, kind of outsmarting them, and him kind of. He's never really had a physical fight scene like that.
Very true. Not in this particular Sherlock version, because we know other different Sherlock versions in the canon that Sherlock is actually he's a really good boxer, so he does know how to physically fight and defend himself. And I'm kind of glad that it wasn't really boxing style. It was more just
street fighting.
Street fighting.
Yeah.
Which, I enjoyed because it kind of made it more modern.
Yeah.
But that's definitely what this particular version of Sherlock is about.
And more real too, because I feel like it didn't feel like a choreographed fight scene. It was more like raw, more like scrappy, like we're gonna use whatever we can to like kick the shit out of each other, and that's what's happening.
Fights out of convenance, turning on and off the fountain and everything like that.
Although when you brought up the realistic part of it, you've got this guy who is a trained assassin for the most part, and you got this Sherlock who I'm going to assume knows how to fight because in his mind palace he has kind of like read everything to be able to fight somebody. How can Sherlock be able to outfight or be equal to this guy that he's fighting, which I was like,
I think it's all about just being one step ahead of him when you're fighting. I mean every move is calculated according to Sherlock, so if he knows the move, it's like chess. If you know your opponent's move ahead of time, then you can kind of beat them. So I think that he might not be as physically capable of beating him, but he is mentally capable of beating him.
I don't think he was going there expecting a pool fight. I don't think anyone.
He's like, I'm here again.
Right?
Same place,
Gosh darn it. And then he finds out, because he was so determined that this case was actually leading to the Black Pearl.
Yeah.
Which it wasn't. It was
Right.
actually the Agra USB. Which brings us to Mary.
Which can we really just talk about that for a second? Because I was a little disappointed with Sherlock's reaction, only because he let him get away in that moment after you've had this epic fight scene. Yes, I understand that you're like reeling about Mary.
He shut out the light.
Well,
So
yeah,
did he get him?
But he
let
was
him give him
I mean,
away?
he could have got him. Come on, you guys. It's Sherlock. He could have got him. I think he was just so like, wait, Mary? I thought she destroyed the USB in the fireplace, and then all of a sudden,
I think he was in shock.
I think it's twofold for Sherlock. I think in that instance, he was a little bit shocked, but I also think to what you said about Sherlock thinking a few steps ahead, he's like, how do I protect Mary from what is coming? So in his mind, I feel like he's thinking, oh man, this guy's going after Mary. If it's one guy, it might be multiple people. I've got to figure out how to protect Mary from this, but I need him to go away so I can figure it out.
But do we really think he was that distracted because he was thinking about Mary, or do we think he was distracted because he was so disappointed that wasn't Moriarty?
I think it was about Mary, because I think that from
I think it was Mary.
Because
Yeah.
I think from what we learned, he promised John and Mary that he would protect them. And I think this is an instance where he is now feeling like, and I know somebody said in the chat room, like he starts to realize it's not a game anymore.
Yes.
That he now needs to kick in the protective aspect of what he promised Mary and John, that he would protect them and protect the kid as well.
Yeah, and he also said when he was speaking to AJ, like, Mary, I know Mary. Mary is my friend.
Right.
So it's that personal relationship that I think he was getting over the shock that, oh, this is someone I know and I'm actually close to.
But see, that's another thing that annoyed me, because he gave this, clearly this man wants to kill Mary, and he's giving him all this information about Mary. Like, he gave her his name, he gave her name, sorry, he gave him her name, then he said that she was a close friend. I mean, it's not, especially when you're bringing all this technological, like, aspects of the show now, like, this person can easily go back and research this.
But but also it goes back to what we said, which was, I think Sherlock was he was already thinking ahead, and I think he let it slip, all the Mary information.
But does Sherlock really make mistakes like that?
I think it can when it comes to his personal life.
Yes. Adding to that, yes, because we know that Sherlock, like, is usually, for the most part, high IQ, low EQ, but we saw a lot of emotion out of Sherlock in all these 3 episodes of the season. And I think that's where his emotional side came over, and that's a lot of times when people get emotional, they're not thinking straight. As brilliant as Sherlock usually is, when his emotions take place, he might not be all right there.
Yeah.
Right.
You know?
And
So I'll give him that.
And I think Irene's name didn't come up a lot this season at all, which was shocking to me. However, I think that being a godfather, having a baby, not him having a baby, but like having a baby in his life, like
Having an essential family.
He did become an emotional person, because now he has to care. Now he feels like he has to care for somebody else, and not only just a kid, but he's got 2 people that he actually cares about. He's never actually cared about anybody before, like he has Mary, John, and now this baby.
What about
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson? We always forget about Mrs. Hudson. Do we really just counter out like that? Because I really think underneath it all, like, she's not just their nanny, she's more of like, their mom. It's weird.
Mama Hudson.
I feel like
Mama Hudson.
I feel like we have to include Mrs. Hudson in that. Like,
Yes.
we always
Yes.
just counter, but I want to throw her in there too.
She played a big part in episode 2, which we will definitely
I'm very
cover.
excited about that.
Don't worry. But that takes us to pretty much Georgia, Tbilisi. We find out this coup at the embassy, the British embassy. There was a coup back in Tbilisi, Georgia, 6 years ago. And for everyone who's tuning in and watching us, if you watch the Sherlock After Show, the previous seasons, we also had our host, Megan Salinas, who is also joining us on this panel. Hello, Megan.
Hi, Megan.
I have no idea if this mic is picking me up or not.
Scoot over.
Oh, yeah.
It's picking you up through our mics if your mic's not on.
There we go.
So, guys, it's great to be here.
So, Megan, welcome back to Sherlock. Aren't you so excited to talk about this
I
episode?
am. It is super exciting to be here. Sorry for the delay. Traffic on the 101 was terrible tonight.
Welcome to Los Angeles,
Yes.
everybody.
If you
LA.
didn't know where we filmed, now you know.
Now
We
you
filmed
know.
in Los Angeles.
I know. But, Megan, what were your thoughts about this episode?
It's been a long time, and it was really nice to get back into the swing of things.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever Sherlock goes away, like, for a while, I'm like, oh, what? You forget how much you appreciate the mystery and how much fun it is. And then it comes back, and that intro music starts, and you're like, oh, yeah!
It's actually my ringtone.
Just so excited.
Really?
The Sherlock theme is my ringtone.
It's brilliant.
Yeah.
I love it.
So it was really good to come back, although this episode in particular, and I'm sure we'll touch on it, the ending infuriated me.
Okay. Yes, fair enough. You're not the only one, I'm sure.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. I'm just gonna sit here and sulk.
Sulk away as
Well, everybody says hello to
Yes,
you, Meg, in the
everyone's
chat
saying
room.
hello in the live chat. Our good fans who are following us. Yes, so we're pretty much at the point where we go to Tbilisi, Georgia, the embassy coup. What did you think about this setup? And we have Agra, the 4 assassins. We have AJ, Alex, Gabriel, and Mary. Mary, but it's initials. But I was like, if Mary, it was like, who's R?
Yeah.
that eventually gets answered to Rosamund Mary. I like this. But what did you think of this coup and how it all went down?
I always love seeing Mary in her former life because now she's got like a baby, she's got a husband, like she's all mommed out. But I love seeing her when she's back and she's like fighting crime. Like she's an assassin. Like that's kick ass. Like who says that they can marry an assassin? And it just brings me back to last season when, you know, they found out who she really was, and there was that whole thing between her and John and Sherlock and John trying to kill her and then Sherlock having to intervene and like all this stuff. So I love seeing her in that dynamic because it just brings to life a new Mary. I feel like we always forget that, you know, she can protect herself and her family if she needs to.
Oh, for sure.
I think what I love about this, what you said about Mary, knowing her backstory, is that, you know, the show's called Sherlock, but it's not just about Sherlock. And there's equal screen time sometimes for a lot of these characters, even though, you know, we'll talk about Miss Hudson next episode, but that for them to take a chunk out of screen time, which is a lot of screen time, like when we're doing an after show, a dead time is a long time.
Yes.
So to take a chunk out of an episode, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, just so they can show us a coup, that's a lot for a character that's not the title character. And I thought it was really great to see that. Obviously, it built us up so we can get to know Mary. You know, it kind of strung us along. We get to know Mary. We know Mary a little bit more. We know her backstory.
You feel for her.
You feel for her. You know where she came from, how she is, how she's trying to protect them. And then that I think that should have given us a clue of to where that would lead.
I did not say
Once
that.
you start,
Once you
start to get to know, you know, when you start to get to like a character, and you're like,
Shoot.
this is not good. This
Yeah.
is not good. And I think that's what, you know, that's where the writers put us in that mindset. Like, man, we love that Mary. She's kick ass. You know, that's what it is.
That was my issue. I was watching this. I was like, God, Mary is so awesome. John is a lucky man.
Yeah.
And then, like, they're playing all these, you know, the all of her backstory with her and AJ. And I'm like, oh, dude, Mary's awesome. Especially everything that she's been through. I was like, this is not going to end well.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. It's really cool to see a character who, you know, it was a shocking revelation that she was a spy to begin with. So it's really cool to see how a character who's now become very accustomed to domestic life, you know, taking care of her husband and her kid, going back to that, because we'll see shades of it all the time, you know, when she's talking to Sherlock and she's like, oh yeah, I have access to this thing on my phone and like to all these MI5 databases and things like that just because I can. So it's really cool seeing kind of what her day-to-day was like before deciding she wanted to get away from that life. And yeah, the other thing is like watching this kind of go down. Like, I was looking at that British lady who was getting rescued, and I was like, she is chill. Like, if I was ever in a hostage situation, I would want to be that calm. But, yeah, seeing all this go down, it's one of those things where it's really cool and exciting whenever we get, like, an action sequence in Sherlock, because it is so focused on the internal and the cool camera work as he's going through his mental processes. So seeing an actual firefight is pretty cool, too. But, yeah, it's just... I just keep thinking about how it ends for poor AJ.
I thought that was a good point, Megan, that, you know, Mary does know all of this stuff because she was part of this, you know, mercenary like assassin group, and I find it really interesting that Sherlock directs a lot of his thoughts to Mary when they're in these situations, because Mary is essentially, and I'm sorry to say, smarter than John in a lot of ways when it comes to thinking like that. Because she's smarter than him, and it's not a bad thing. John brings his own little, you know...
But she's had more training in certain analytical...
And to that point, I was just thinking, because I find it very odd that a person, and maybe that's just me, odd that a person like Mary, who's gone through this kind of militaristic background, would not have a connection with her military husband.
I was just
Because
thinking-
John came from, even though he's a doctor, he was a combat doctor. That means he's been out in the field. That means they've got that military connection. And I'm surprised that the writers didn't make that a thing on some level.
Like a big thing between them.
Like a big thing between them.
Like
not,
when there's a mission, when the game is
yeah.
that's
Like
what-
maybe not string Sherlock into that part of their life, but at least they knew that, hey, this is my background. I have a background in, I have a military
They
background.
kind of touched up on it when it comes to having the baby. It's always, who needs to go, me or you? And then it's usually, well, you know more about this, or you know more about this, so you need to go. I mean, they touched up on that a little bit. I don't think they was necessarily like beating over the head that they're both in the military, but when it comes to priority, they do prioritize very well.
Well, and it's also as much as we love Mary and John together, there's still a lot of disconnect between them.
Right.
Like they're hiding secrets from each other, and they're not being completely honest.
But I think that had a lot to do with how they got married.
They're how they got married, just their whole careers in general. They can't really talk about everything together.
It is a shame, because again, you bring up a great point about their war-torn backgrounds. Like, you'd think that would be something that they could connect over, but I would think that, like, the reason, that they don't necessarily is because Mary tried so hard to leave that life behind and cover it up when she got together with John.
I was gonna say, in all fairness, that disconnect I feel like is more on John's part, because when this whole thing happened with Mary in last season, she gave him the USB drive. She gave him the option to look it over. She gave him all of the answers. She said, we could talk about it. And he threw it in the fire and was like, no, I just want you as you. So she was open to it. She was ready to be like, put it in the past, but he didn't want to hear it.
That's true. He was the one that insisted the here and now was more important.
Yeah.
And so, no need to bring it up, I suppose.
Yeah. And I mean, like, as great as a connection it is, that's not the biggest thing in their relationship.
Right.
That's not the biggest focal point. But, all right, so getting back to Mary.
Yeah.
No, this is great.
Yeah, the most important thing is taking care of their two children. Their newborn daughter and the very large man.
And
Yeah.
Sherlock.
Oh, yes.
Just
I was like, they have
Yeah.
two?
I did.
What's the other one?
It took me a second there.
Yes,
I
that's
had to
very
make it,
funny.
I got
Well, congratulations, you're smarter than I was. Yes, but Mary, okay, I love this because as smart as Mary is and how experienced she is in operatives and covert and all that, it seems like a little sloppy move of not realizing that the USB had a tracker in it this entire time. Like, she's trying to hide and travel all these places, so Sherlock couldn't possibly find her,
Right.
based on chances of dies. Interesting. But the fact that she couldn't even think that, maybe this USB has a tracker on me.
I don't think she thought that Sherlock would be tracking her like that, though. Like, I just can't even. I mean, I think we saw Sherlock this season. Somebody called it the emotional journey in the chat room. Season 4, Sherlock, the emotional journey.
Yes.
I think that we saw a lot of Sherlock utilize what I like to call the James Bond-esque version of things. So, like, he puts things in things. You know what I mean? Like, he finds ways to put things, we saw it in episode 3, like, you're like, when would he think of that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We've never seen that side of Sherlock. Again, a new season, a new technologically advanced Sherlock, where he's now putting trackers in things like that. He's just never been that person before.
That kind of person. I think it's just Mary. I'm a big fan of Mary. I think Mary's just too smart to have an oversight such as that.
Well, I agree wholeheartedly. The thing is that this was the Sherlock equivalent of, how in cartoons they'll have a character like zoom across the country or like flee to a secluded location around the world, and then Bugs Bunny will already be there when they get there or something like that. This was the Sherlock equivalent of that, where it's just played up for laughs. It's like, we're going to take 5 minutes out of this episode to show how far Mary is going and at what lengths she'll go to avoid being tracked, only to have Sherlock be there as soon as she gets
That was funny.
Yeah,
her
and
endpoint.
Thank you,
Marissa, I
technology.
mean, going back a little bit, this is before you got here, Megan. You said that Mary was too smart to have a lapse of that, but when I had brought up the Sherlock thing, giving him all that information, you guys said he was just so concerned about Mary and protecting her that's why he let that slip. I can say the same thing about Mary in this instance. She was so concerned about protecting her family at that time that she was just like, I just need to get out of here.
Absolutely.
That's very fair.
So yeah, I think that's why she probably forgot about the
Somebody said
track.
Yeah.
Sherlock
I accept
Holmes
that.
equals James Bond.
Thank you, Kalia. So that pretty much takes us to Morocco, where Sherlock and Watson are already meeting her there. But the shootout, and we find that AJ is, yes, still alive, and his whole torture background. I felt bad for AJ.
Oh my gosh, that poor guy. Like that whole, and not to mention like I mentioned really great camera work in Sherlock, and that's something that they've done really well throughout all of the seasons. The scene where he falls to the ground and like then we
Beautiful.
get the passage of time and he's back in his flat after that flashback. That was a really good transition.
Beautiful.
From the past to the present. And yeah, you just feel for this poor guy because they were a family, and just years and years of torture and the thought that one of their own betrayed them, that it wasn't a setup from an outside party, just because, and especially for a just because reason, like there was no need to suspect an outside party with a motive like that. So it makes perfect sense, but it's just so tragic.
I think that's what makes it even worse. Is it's not just physical torture; it's the mental torture of somebody betrayed us. And like he could hear Alex and Gabriel being tortured and killed also.
Right.
So it's like all this mental, like you're seeing your whole world of what you fought for fall apart, and somebody is behind it, or you think that.
Yeah.
And Mary was the only female in that group too.
Yes.
Which I find interesting that AJ would think that the only female in the group would betray the three guys.
Well, because
He didn't have a lot of information.
I'm saying
to go
like
on.
that
British,
was his.
Yeah, that was very frustrating.
The conversation that he overheard was that the British woman.
the
yes.
English
woman.
woman, yes.
And that's
so
all
he
he
made
went
the
on.
assumption
Yeah.
that it was Mary.
Yeah. Which is really frustrating. It's like, come on, man. Like
There
you're
are lots of British women.
Right.
Yeah, but there's
Not
a
the
lot of
person
British
that you've been.
But like Mary, who's essentially like your family, you have information on her, so you guys can never betray each other. It's like you couldn't give her the benefit of the doubt.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's what just
Probably
frustrated
hard
me.
to think straight when you're being tortured.
Tortured,
that way.
That's true, yeah.
And like that's I will give it to AJ. So and we find out in his whole flashback that he hid his USB stick in the Margaret Thatcher. That was only a special set of 6, hence the Six Thatchers. He was going all over destroying Thatchers to find his USB.
To track Mary.
To track Mary.
Yeah.
To track ammo.
Right.
Ammo.
I wonder if they because when we saw the montage of them destroying all the Six Thatchers, they were in specific places. Like, did he put? I can't remember if he put the USB in the Thatcher and then he just kind of traveled the world, like traveled all across Britain and then just ended up in a place. Like, is that how that happened?
Well, he put the USB in a Thatcher under fire.
Right.
So he wasn't really thinking, but he knew it was Margaret Thatcher. And then we find out that there was 6 of them. It was a special set of 6.
Right.
So he went to those 6 specific locations of the buyers
had
of
them.
those
Yes.
and
Got it.
destroyed them.
And let's be fair. Like, I'm sure when he put that USB inside the Margaret Thatcher, I'm sure he wasn't thinking, I'm gonna go back and find it. I'm sure he was thinking, I just don't want them to find it because they're gonna kill me.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't think that
I
he
had
was
to keep my friend's secrets safe.
exactly. Yeah.
Exactly. But the other thing is that, like, how did the Margaret Thatcher that he stowed it away in, like, that's a war-torn area where hostages are being kept. How did it get from point A to point B?
Right.
I don't know.
And how do you track that?
His
Sherlock
good
did it.
carrier system.
Yeah, artifact. So I don't know. I have no idea.
Yeah, apparently it was Golder and Company in Georgia.
Yeah.
So they're really good on their shipping and handling.
Oh my gosh.
But yes, I mean, we find out AJ was tortured for 6 years. He got out, hence he's destroying all these Thatchers. And it really just brings us to really the climactic scene at the end Where we find out it's always someone under our noses this whole time.
Hiding in plain
In plain sight. What were your thoughts of the whole reveal? It was the receptionist, because the receptionist knows all. Vivian Norbury.
Yes.
From the beginning of the episode, from like the first scene.
Did you expect Vivian Norbury?
You know what? This was a very Sherlock thing to do. It reminded me a lot of the very first episode, actually, where the cabbie ended up being the culprit.
Yes.
Where it's like, here's a character that we're going to show you on screen for 30 seconds, and then, whoa, we're going to blow your mind with it at the end. It was them the whole time. And the only reason it's surprising is because you forgot they were even there.
It's like a Scooby-Doo episode.
Yeah.
Oh, man, Jenkins.
You're like, right. And you're like, I remember seeing that character one time. This is the guy under the mask. Miss Norbury was sitting behind everybody, not
She
talking.
even had a line
She
at
had
the beginning
one line.
of the
That was
episode.
it.
line.
Shoot.
But you know, what I loved about it was that it was her, because again, you know,
It fit with her motive.
right. And you know, I always tell people all the time, if you're working in a corporate environment, you're like, do not mess with the administrative assistants.
Yeah.
Yes.
They it's like a costumer. Do not mess with the costumer.
Yeah.
You're in a theater, because they will screw you up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, not only that, I mean, like we said with Mary, like we love seeing her, you know, be this powerful, strong woman and be this assassin. I think the same goes for you know, Vivian Norbury. I mean, it's this little old lady. Like, who would suspect you? And it's like, you're like kick ass. Like, you're like selling secrets and like trying to kill people and all this stuff. Like, that's
Which
pretty
should have
awesome.
foreshadowed Mrs. Hudson, because
Shoot.
you should have known after Mrs. Norbury, Mrs. Hudson was up to something on the other side. You cannot trust these little white ladies.
We'll get to Mrs. Hudson, trust us. I really enjoyed it. I think it was because I rewatched this episode a couple times, and I was like, man, we should have picked that up immediately. And I'm like, I think that's what Sherlock does. So we've seen all these episodes, and still it gets us every time. We're like, shoot, we should have known.
Yeah.
Like the Scooby-Doo episode.
Every
telling you.
Would have gotten
time.
away with it, too.
If it wasn't for Sherlock
And his
And
meddling
you're done.
friend.
and his meddling friend, Mr. Watson, Mr. Dr. Watson.
Yes, but it comes down to, yes, Vivian Norbury is giving the secrets. She's the one behind it all. She's ammo. But what did you think of the whole shootout? Well, it was really just one shot, but that's what did it. Mary, sacrificing herself to save Sherlock.
In the word, and she did not throw away her shot. In the words of Hamlet, in the words of, to take it there.
I did like how after it happened, she's like, "This makes us even, right?" I feel, it makes us even. It
Yeah,
makes
of
us
course
even. I don't
Mary
even
would
care
say
what
that.
you say.
Yeah.
And she did apologize for shooting. I was like, I'm sorry I shot you that one time.
Yeah.
Wow, this
Like-
really hurts. Ow.
Right.
Yeah, it kind of sucks getting
That
shot
was
at.
a terrible thing I did to you. I'm so sorry.
I don't think I was sad as much as I was like shocked. Like, I remember gasping when it happened. Like, oh my gosh, this happened.
I was sad only when she said Mary Watson was the only life worth living, and I'm like tearing up thinking about it, because I can't even, like we said, Marissa, you and I, and I'm sure Megan, we loved Mary. Like, she was one of those characters that they really made you feel for, and they shoot her, and you know, you just think, like, you have a husband, you have a baby, like, you have all this stuff to live for, and you just died because some little old bitch just shot you.
That's true.
bad.
Because she
went
was
through
bored.
all of this,
bored.
all of this training, and she got taken out by this
I
this
can't.
old lady.
She was bored and jealous. Jealousy.
Yes.
Right.
Jealousy. Ooh.
She just wanted to be a part
Jealousy
of the...
has driven her mad.
Like I said, the end of this episode just drove me absolutely up the wall. I didn't feel sad. I was angry.
Yes,
I was like,
same.
how dare you, Sherlock Holmes?
A couple of folks said, why couldn't Mary have just pushed Sherlock out of the way?
I mean, yes, true. I think we're all thinking in that.
Because of television?
But I also think the trajectory of you the forward trajectory of you moving at somebody,
he also,
to push her out of the way, she still would have been in the
It's
bullet.
entirely
Yeah.
possible that she, like, if she had attempted to, he just would have gotten shot in
Somebody
a
would
place.
have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, like, she was probably just covering her bases, so to speak.
Yeah.
She was protected.
I think it was more the dramatic effect, because essentially this whole big storyline, it is Mary. This, like, what else could she end on. Like, this is the perfect setup to end her character.
Well, was I the only one who kind of had hope that she would survive the shooting?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I was
We all just,
absolutely.
Because I was like,
She's
she's sitting there like apologizing, laughing, and I'm like, she'll be fine.
It's not the first time she's been shot at,
Right.
trust me.
Right.
Yeah, it's just
I thought.
frustrating.
I think that in those situations when you have somebody like that get shot, I think for me, I kind of already know that this is not going the way that, because like we said at the beginning, they set us up they set us up as viewers, as fans of Mary, for Mary to die.
Yes, they did.
With everything they strung us along with this episode.
And also, because I rewatched this episode a couple times, like, Holmes kept saying there was all these like little nods that they were going to kill Mary, because Holmes kept saying all these lines of his confidence, like, I will keep you safe. It has to be in London. It's my city. It's my turf. Come home and everything will be all right. I promise you. That is what Sherlock said to Mary
So
when they were in
foreshadowing.
Morocco. I was like, dude, you just jinxed yourself. Like, he was so, it got to the point he was so confident that Mary was going to be fine. And of course, it wasn't. And that's where the vow broke. And that's how Watson got mad at him.
Mad.
Mad.
See,
More
that's-
mad.
that's
More
the thing,
mad.
like, that's the
You
thing that-
swore you would protect Mary.
But as a Harry Potter fan, they did not break the unbreakable vow. So I'm just saying,
Sure.
they should have done. They should have done that. They would have all been protected. We wouldn't be in this position right
Yes.
Oh gosh, who would Benedict Cumberbatch play in the Harry Potter world?
Oh my
Lupin.
goodness. Lupin.
Oh, that's
Totally.
a good one.
Good
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
We
But
love him.
that's what made me so angry about it, is like it would be really easy to see, again, looking at these story beats, like if I was reading this summary on Wikipedia, or if I was reading like the script, I would look at this final scene and be like, awesome, so they fridged Mary. They fridged Mary for Sherlock and Watson's man pain. And I don't like it when our strong female character, and I struck
Why is a
him up
woman
there.
that has to die?
But like such a character that I'm this invested in, who's so interesting, gets fridged for the purposes of man pain, I get really annoyed and upset by that. However, if you do look at it from another lens, it's her making a very noble sacrifice.
Yes.
And you can make the argument that she wasn't actually fridged, that this is a good conclusion to her character arc.
Right.
But there's still that part of me is just like, no, don't fridge such a cool female character.
And
so
somebody-
I'm torn.
And somebody, Billie Jean girl 24 said those paramedics never did show up, and John is a doctor and he couldn't even save her.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting that John, a combat military doctor, could not figure. I'm sure he was in shock. Like your wife gets shot.
Yeah,
like
it's just
you cannot.
emotionally
But
wrecked.
his instinct as a military combat doctor did not
Should
kick
be.
in
He did
in that
absolutely
instance.
nothing.
Well, he did. Well, he did. Fair, in fairness,
emotional.
he put the pressure on the wound. Like, what else can you do at that point? What does he want to, like, take his shirt off and, like, Alperin right there in the aquarium? Like,
yes.
Yeah, but
Make it an intent.
Get it together,
You know,
John.
he
Mary.
he
Save
tried.
your wife.
He tried. I think he really just wanted to get in what he could get in at that moment, because you know, I'm sure as a doctor, you know when there's something is a lost cause, like you know. So I'm sure he just wanted to say
Where
everything.
he's just saying, "You're gonna be fine. You're gonna be fine," as a way to just try to make it easier when she goes.
Don't even say it, Megan. Don't even say it.
Apparently,
Yeah.
all the strong women in this show die. Irene Adler
She's fine.
died.
Irene Adler
Irene's
didn't die.
fine.
Yeah,
I say
she's
died.
she's
as in-
alive.
We said she's alive. Somebody said Irene
Still
Adler was a strong
texting
woman. She
him.
died, and Mary was a strong woman. She also died. So all of this, they're just not a part of the show right now. And
Well, and if you think about it, Mark Gaddis has
Mom.
also said in interviews they were ultimately, Mary was set up to die in the show. Like, we always knew that Mary was going to die, because essentially Sherlock is about Sherlock Holmes
And Dr.
Dr. Watson, not about Sherlock
Rebel,
and Watson
rebel,
and Mary. So, like, granted, unfortunately, as much as we love Mary, they had to kill her off to bring it back to the main two characters.
didn't I say that?
But I you know,
You
and,
can make
and
changes, guys.
I remember
Yeah.
saying that the night. I remember saying the night we watched it. I remember saying Mary took away from the Sherlock and Dr. Watson dynamic.
I don't
I
see. I
disagree.
disagree.
No,
Thank
no,
you.
no,
I totally
100%
disagree.
disagree.
I 100%. I think
Maybe
that it
screen
added,
time.
Yes.
I just meant screen
But-
time. I just meant
oh.
screen time because, like, to your
No,
point,
it's screen
it's
time
called-
made their dynamic more interesting.
if you look at what's behind us,
Down
We're very upset about Mary.
everybody,
right
I know. But if you look, you look at the way that they've kind of set up the show. Every promo isn't Mary Sherlock and Watson.
Yeah.
It's Sherlock and Watson.
Yes.
And this isn't the Mary show. And like I said, this episode was a lot of screen time for other characters. This, Stephen Moffat could have easily put himself in the promos as Mycroft. So there could have been opportunity to throw other characters in there, but.
No, I disagree with you. I think that Mary made the bond between Sherlock and Watson stronger, and that only what happened after that with her sending in the tape and telling Sherlock to save John only proves my point even further, because that's making their bond stronger even through this kind of
and
tragedy.
Not to mention that what we had at the end of the last season in terms of what lengths Sherlock was willing to go through for the two of them. They made their dynamic so much more interesting, and that's what I was most disappointed by at the end of this episode, was I was really getting accustomed and very fond of this familial dynamic that they all shared together. And then they just pulled the rug out from under you. And again, I get it from a dramatic standpoint, and I get it from a character arc standpoint, but it will never not feel at least a little bit like she was fridged for no reason.
Yeah.
That's just me, though. I totally get it. If you were all about it, I totally get it.
I mean, I wasn't all about it. I'm just saying, to get back to the main, to get and
Except for that it takes.
And in episodes 2 and 3, we find that.
We'll get there.
Eventually we just got to get back to the meat of the two main characters.
But
and
by the end of this episode, we can't get back to that point without drastic measures of where they both are emotionally at the end of this episode. It's removing her from the equation isn't putting everybody back at square one. It's driving them further apart.
Right. Mm-hmm. But you got to tear stuff up to build it back together. But Marisa, in the books, was Molly a big part of the books?
No.
Hooper?
I'm sorry, not Molly. Was Mary a part of the books?
Mary was part of the books. Yes, Mary was there, but Mary got killed off in the books.
So
for canon,
you knew.
Yeah. It's like Mary and creators.
Did she get?
Yes, the creators always said Mary was always a character that was set up to die, and she did in the show.
Did she die in the same way in the books as she did in the show?
I'm trying to remember.
Hey
guys on YouTube, let us know.
Saving Sherlock from a little old lady.
I imagine it's slightly different, but Mary,
Sure.
yes, Mary did die in the canon, and but when we talked about there's a lot of
changes and updates.
yeah. The creative liberties that the show really does.
How about not kill her, and you'll surprise all the readers?
Oh my
Megan,
god.
she's dead, girl. We got to move on.
I know.
I'm just as upset, but we got to move on.
One more thing about Mary. We do have to cover this because we saw that quick scene of John on the bus, flirting, texting, emotional cheating with Mary, on this woman from the bus of John. What were your thoughts of John?
Seemed out of character.
Yes, so out of character. What were your thoughts about that?
I get it, but it seemed out of character.
But it goes back to what you said earlier, which was the relationship between Dr. Watson and Mary was never a stable relationship. I mean, when we first saw them, they got married so fast. But then the wedding was like a train. Was that right?
Yeah.
And we didn't trust Mary in that instance either. So if we didn't trust Mary, John certainly wasn't going to trust Mary, and I think that kind of was a running theme through there.
That undercurrent lack of trust is ultimately what and granted, he didn't do anything outside of texting, but at least that we saw. But yeah, I guess that undercurrent of mistrust or lies by omission, that sort of thing, it's not something that they're ever going to overtly have conflict with, but it does create this sort of tension where maybe he would seek outside, I don't know, outside emotional connection.
Yeah,
and somebody said that
I thought it was all emotional cheating.
That they felt like that's why John was equally as mad at Sherlock at the end when Mary died because of the stuff that he had.
Because he felt
guilty. And he projected a lot of that onto Sherlock. So good call to those in chat room.
Misplaced anger.
Misplaced anger.
More so. Yep. Anything else about this episode?
Molly is watching the baby now. Like,
Molly's a
this
babysitter.
entire time, I was like, "Where's the baby?" And then they're like, "Oh, friends are watching her," and I was like, "Oh, okay, that makes sense."
But
Which I feel like they should have just hired a nanny.
Why? What about Mrs. Hudson? Like, Mrs. Hudson would have.
they can afford a nanny. Yeah.
I mean, they can't afford a nanny.
They already knew Mrs. Hudson was the wife of a
I'm
drug
not
dealer.
your
She cannot be.
housekeeper.
Also,
Right.
Molly has a day job.
Yeah.
She sure
That's
does.
what I mean.
Obviously, she don't have a day job anymore. She's too busy babysitting, this kid now. And I thought it was interesting that that the relationship that she has with Sherlock, she iced him out.
She did.
She, and you saw that at the end. And I thought
shoulder.
you were like, oh. But obviously, we'll talk about her relationship with Sherlock later on. But
Yep.
and I think that was a part of her icing him out. Part of the reason why she ended up icing him out was to avoid what she, her own personal feelings for Sherlock.
Yeah, which we will definitely cover. Really quick, before we leave, if for the fans of Sherlock, if you didn't know, some Easter eggs, some trivia's for you, little tidbits on this episode. Holmes' request to be reminded about Norbury, as an example of his overconfidence, is actually a reference to The Adventures of the Yellow Face. That story. They also use the character Norbury to always remind him about his overconfidence. So hence we had that moment. And also the credits, if you stuck around for the credits, in certain names they spelled out 6 Napoleons. That were certain letters were highlighted in red. They spelled out 6 Napoleons, which is actually a nod to this the 6 Napoleon storyline, which inspired the Six Thatchers. This one. Also, one of Mary's aliases when she's on the run is Gabrielle Ashdown. Ashdown was an alias used by Holmes in the 1970s film The Private Life of Sherlock Holmes, which is a personal favorite of Mark Gatiss. And one more, the appointment of Samara. Mycroft points out, as a child, Holmes wrote his own version as titled An Appointment at Sumatra. This is a reference to a Doyle case that the book version of Holmes said the world is not yet ready for. The title, The Giant Rat of Sumatra.
Those are good little tidbits. Thank you, Marisa.
Yeah, fun Easter eggs. I like, learning more about this episode.
I wondered, the other thing just about the show from the cast standpoint is that Martin Freeman and the actress who played Mary were married in real life, and they ended up divorcing.
Amanda.
At the end, like in a couple of months ago, obviously they were stopped filming. They've completed filming at that point, but they were married and now they're no longer together. So
it's kind of like art imitating life.
yes, it was. She died, and so did their relationship.
Shoot,
So sad.
that is really sad. I don't want to end the episode there, but unfortunately we might have to. But
That's another Easter egg.
I really did enjoy this. But just the setup of the episode. With the whole grim story tale of the death and in Sumatra, just kind of set the tone for this whole season. It's going to be dark and grim.
Right.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Amanda Abington. Thanks, Mr.
Amanda
Henry.
Abington. Yes, Amanda. But really good. Keep tuning in because we are covering episodes 2 and 3 later in the same day.
We'll be back in an hour.
We'll be back. So keep tuning in. In the meantime, where can everyone keep following you?
I am Timothy Michael. You can find me on all social media platforms at I am Timothy Mike.
If you're watching right now, I'm headed to the Trump Report right now in the next studio. You can find me at Drexel Heard.
I'm Megan. You guys can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at the Menguin. That's TheMenguin.
And you can follow me on Twitter at Serafini TV. You can follow all of us here on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all those fun social media platforms at AFTERBUZZ TV. Keep rating, keep commenting. We're back. It took us 3 years, but we're back.
And we're coming back
Yes.
right after this.
Certainly,
So.
I missed us, and I'm glad we're still here. So keep tuning in, and we will see you next time.
See you guys soon.
From executive producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire AfterBuzz TV staff, we would like to thank you for listening to the AfterBuzz TV network. To watch or listen to other after shows and post comments or questions, be sure to visit AfterBuzzTV.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of AfterBuzz TV.
Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.